name is Jensy, and I have chosen to read some stories out of a book. The stories are by Johann Peter Hebel, and the title of the book is How a Ghastly Story Was Brought to Light by a Common or Garden Butcher's Dog. I'm going to read about 5 stories, and if I mispronounce some of the German words, I apologize in advance. The Dentist. 2 loafers who had been roaming around the country together for some time because they were too lazy to work or had learnt no trade finally got into a tight corner because they had no money left and they saw no quick way of getting any. Then they had this idea. They went begging at doors for bread, which they intended to use not to fill their stomachs, but for a trick. For they kneaded and rolled it into little balls and coated them with the dust from old, rotten, worm-eaten wood so that they looked just like little yellow pills from the chemist. Then, for a couple of pence, they bought some sheets of red paper at the bookbinder's, for a pretty color often helps take people in. Next, they cut up the paper and wrapped the pills in it, 6 or 8 to a little packet. Then one of them went on ahead to a village where there was a fair, and into the Red Lion, where he hoped to find a good crowd. He ordered a glass of wine, but he didn't drink it, but sadly sat in a corner holding his face in his hand, moaning under his breath, and fidgeting and turning this way and that. The good farmers and townsfolk in the inn thought the poor fellow must have a terrible toothache. Yet what could they do? They pitied him. They consoled him, saying it would go away soon, then went back to their drinks and their market day affairs. Meanwhile, the other idler came in. The 2 scoundrels pretended they'd never seen each other in their lives before. They didn't look at each other until the one seemed to react to the other's moans in the corner. "My friend," he said, "have you got a toothache?" And he strode slowly over to him. "I'm Dr. Schnauzius Rapunzius from Trafalgar," he continued. Such resounding foreign names help take people in too, you know, like pretty colors. "If you take my tooth pills," he went on, "I can easily get rid of the pain. One of them will do the trick, at most 2. "Please God, you're right," said the other rogue. So now the fine Dr. Rapunzius took out one of the red packets from his pocket and prescribed 1 pill to be placed on the tongue and bitten on firmly. Customers at the other tables now craned their necks, and one by one they came over to observe the miracle cure. You can imagine what happened, but no. The first bite seemed to do the patient no good at all. He gave a terrible scream. The doctor was pleased. They had, he said, got the better of the pain, and quickly he gave him the second pill to be taken likewise. Now, suddenly, the pain had all gone. The patient jumped for joy, wiped the sweat from his brow, though there was none there, and pretended to show his thanks by pressing more than a trifling sum into the Savior's hand. The trick was artfully done and had its desired effect. For all those present now wanted some of those excellent pills too. The doctor offered them at 24 kreuzers a packet, and they were all sold in a few minutes. Of course, the 2 scoundrels, now left separately, one after the other, met up to laugh at the people's stupidity and had a good time on their money. The fools had paid dear for a few crumbs of bread. Even in times of famine, you never got so little for 24 kreuzers. But the waste of money was not the worst part of it. For in time, the pellets of breadcrumbs naturally became as hard as stone. So when a year later, a poor dupe had a toothache and confidently bit on a pill with the offending tooth, once and then again, just imagine the awful pain he had got himself for 24 kreuzers instead of a cure. From this, we can learn how easy it is to be tricked if you believe what is told you by any vagrant whom you meet for the first time in your life, have never seen before, and will never see again. Some of you who read this will perhaps be thinking, I was once silly like that too, and brought suffering on myself. Remember, those who can earn their money elsewhere and don't go around villages and fairs with holes in their stockings or a white buckle on one shoe and a yellow one on the other. A short stage. The postmaster told a Spaniard who drove up to his relay station with 2 horses, "From here on, you'll have to take 3. It's a hard pull uphill and the surface is still soft, but that way you'll be there in 3 hours." The Spaniard asked, "When will I get there if I take 4? "In 2 hours. "And if I take 6? "In 1 hour. "I'll tell you what," said the Spaniard after a while, "harness up 8. That way I shan't have to set off at all." Stage reckoning at the inn. Sometimes a cheeky trick comes off well. Sometimes it costs you your coat, often your skin as well. But in this case, it was only coats. One day you see 3 merry students on their travels didn't have a brass farthing left between them. They had spent everything on a good time, but nevertheless they went into another inn intending to leave without sneaking out by the back door. And it suited them fine that they found only the landlord's nice young wife inside. They ate and drank merrily and talked very learnedly about the world being many thousands of years old and how it would last as long again, and how each year to the day and the hour, everything that happened came to pass as it had done on that day and at that hour 6,000 years before. Eventually, one of them turned to the landlady, who was sitting on one side by the window, knitting and listening attentively, and said, "That's how it is, ma'am. We've learned to keep that from our learned tomes. No, we've had to learn that from our learned tomes." And one had the impudence to assert that he just about remembered their being there 6,000 years ago. And he remembered the landlady's pretty friendly face very well indeed. They carried on talking for some time, and the more the landladies seemed to believe everything they said, the more the young gadabouts tucked into the wine and the meat and a fistful of pretzels, and in the end their bill stood chalked up at 5 guilders, 16 kreuzers. They had eaten and drunk their fill, and now they came out with the trick they had planned. "Ma'am," said one, "this time we're short of money, for there are so many inns on the road. But since we know you're a clever woman, we hope that as old friends we can have credit here, and if you agree, in 6,000 years' time, when we come again, we'll pay our old bill together with the new one." The sensible landlady was not upset by that. It was fine by her. She was delighted that the young gentlemen were well served. But before they had noticed her move, she was standing in front of the door and was asking the gentleman kindly, just to settle, now, the bill of 5 guilders and 6 kreuzers that they owed from 6,000 years ago. Since, as they said, everything that happened now was an exact repetition of what had taken place before. Unfortunately, just at that moment, the village mayor came in with a couple of sturdy men to enjoy a glass of wine together. That didn't suit our gay young dogs at all, for now the official verdict was pronounced and carried out. You had to give it to someone who had allowed credit for 6,000 years. The gentlemen were therefore to pay their old debt immediately, or leave their newish overcoats as a pledge. They were obliged to take the second option, and the landlady promised to return their coats in 6,000 years' time, when they came again with a bit more money. This took place in 1805 on the 17th of April in the inn at Sengrichen. I guess we know that so that we'll know when to look for them to come back. Unexpected reunion. At Falun in Sweden, a good 50 years ago, a young miner kissed his pretty young bride-to-be and said, "On the feast of St. Lucia, the parson will bless our love, and we shall be man and wife and start a home of our own." "And may peace and love dwell there with us," said his lovely bride, and smiled sweetly, "for you are everything to me, and without you I'd sooner be in the grave than anywhere else." When, however, before the feast of St. Lucia, the parson had called out their names in church for the second time, "If any of you know cause or just hindrance why these two persons should not be joined together in holy matrimony," and death paid a call. For the next day, when the young man passed her house in his black miner's suit, for a miner is always dressed ready for his own funeral, he tapped at the window as usual and wished her good morning all right, but he did not wish her good evening. He did not return from the mine, and in vain that same morning she sewed a red border on a black neckerchief for him to wear on their wedding day. And when he did not come back, she put it away, and she wept for him and never forgot him. In the meantime, the city of Lisbon in Portugal was destroyed by an earthquake. The 7 Years' War came and went. The Emperor Francis I died. The Jesuits were dissolved. Poland was partitioned. The Empress Maria Theresa died, and Jensy was executed. And America became independent, and the combined French and Spanish force failed to take Gibraltar. Turks cooped up General Stein in the Veteran Cave in Hungary, and the Emperor Joseph died too. King Gustavus of Sweden conquered Russian Finland. The French Revolution came and the Long War began, and Emperor Leopold II too was buried. Napoleon defeated Prussia, the English bombarded Copenhagen, and the farmers sowed and reaped. The millers ground the corn, the blacksmith wielded their hammers, and the miners dug for seams of metal in their workplace under the ground. But in 1809, within a day or two of the feast of St. John, when the miners at Falun were trying to open up a passage between two shafts, they dug up from the rubble and the vitriol water, a good 300 yards below ground, the body of a young man soaked in ferrous vitriol, but otherwise untouched by decay and unchanged, so that all his features and his age were still clearly recognizable, as if he had died only an hour before or had just nodded off at work. Yet when they brought him to the surface, his father and mother and friends and acquaintances were all long since dead, and no one claimed to know the sleeping youth and to remember his misadventure, until the woman came who had once been promised to the miner, who had one day gone below and had not returned. Gray and bent, she hobbled up on a crutch to where he lay and recognized her bridegroom. And more in joyous rapture than in grief, she sank down over the beloved corpse, and it was some time before she had recovered from her fervent emotion. "It is my betrothed," she said at last, "whom I have mourned these past 50 years, and now God grants that I see him once more before I die. A week before our wedding, he went under the ground and never came up again." The hearts of all those there were moved to sadness and tears when they saw the former bride-to-be as an old woman whose beauty and strength had left her, and the groom still in the flower of his youth, and how the flame of young love was rekindled in her breast after 50 years, yet he did not open his mouth to smile, nor his eyes to recognize her, and how finally she, as the sole relative, and the only person who had claimed to him, had the miners carry him into her house until his grave was made ready for him in the churchyard. The next day, when the grave lay ready in the churchyard and the miners came to fetch him, she opened a casket and put the black silk neckerchief with the red stripes on him, and then she went with him in her best Sunday dress, as if it were her wedding day, not the day of his burial. You see, As they lowered him into his grave in the churchyard, she said, "Sleep well for another day or a week or so longer in your cold, wedding bed, and don't let time weigh heavy on you. I have only a few things left to do, and I shall join you soon, and soon the day will dawn. What the earth has given back once, it will not withhold again at the final call," she said as she went away and looked back over her shoulder once more. Thank you for listening. Enjoy your day.